How do I look? This is not the usual Sony A7S III that you guys see me on. We're on a whole new camera. I got a different one. And just a little secret, it's a crop sensor. But jokes aside, I know from the title you know it's a FX30, but I'm really excited about this little camera. And this video isn't sponsored by Sony or anything. I actually thought long and hard about what camera I wanted to get. And after weighing all my options out, I decided on the Sony FX30. And oh, I know it's a crop sensor camera, but I have a couple of things that I want to share with you guys because personally, I think crop sensor cameras kind of get a bad rap. Look, this camera is by no means perfect, and I'm going to share a couple of things that were almost deal breakers for me when I was deciding which camera I actually wanted. But first, let's look at some of the reasons why I did end up going with the Sony FX30. Today's video is sponsored by Epidemic Sound. They have some amazing music. If you guys like any of the music you're hearing in this video, it's all from Epidemic Sound, along with like the majority of all of the music I use on this channel. But we're gonna speak about them a little bit more later on in this video. How nice is this little morning spot? I'm just doing like some test shoots for the FX30. Got this whole beach to myself, and it's not even that early. Perfect day. Got a little setup going over here. Getting some testing going. Pretty nice. So welcome to my little hotel room studio here. Doesn't look so bad. We're shooting on the FX30 right now with the 11mm 1.8 lens, and I think it looks really, really good. We're gonna rapid fire off some of the things that I actually really love about this camera, followed by a couple of what were almost deal breakers when I was deciding whether or not I should get this, because I think it's quite important for you guys to know those. Also, I wanted to mention, you know how this is like the baby brother to the FX3? Do you know there's actually a couple of features on the FX30 that beat the FX3? Like, I'm not even joking about that. I'm gonna share those with you guys a little bit later on as well. So straight to the point, one of the main benefits over getting this versus something like the FX3 or the A7S III is the price. This is significantly cheaper. It's like half, and not only is the body gonna be half of the price, it's also gonna really come into play when you guys start looking at the lenses. Sony recently came out with a trio of really nice affordable lenses for crop cameras. This one, the 11 f1.8, they also came out with a 16 f1.4, which is gonna be beautiful and shallow in the background, but in my opinion, not quite wide enough for vlogging. And they also came out with a 10-20 f4 power zoom lens. Sony has a bunch of other amazing lenses for aps-c cameras, but these recent ones really like kind of round off the lenses that you guys might be looking for when you're looking for an aps-c camera. All of these lenses are going to be significantly cheaper than the full frame equivalents, and they're still really nice and high quality. You can capture beautiful images with them. So price is gonna have to really come there straight in the beginning, because I think that is by far the most beneficial thing over getting an aps-c camera over one of the full frame equivalents. The other benefit of all of these lenses, if you're someone like me that likes to travel, is they are significantly smaller than the full frame ones. Look at the setup that I'm on right now. It's pretty tiny. Like, the body is the same size as the FX3, but the lenses are way smaller and lighter. The FX30 comes with all of the pro features that you want. They have all the really good frame rates and resolutions, like 4K at 120 frames per second, although it does have a crop, which we're gonna cover on later. It also has S-Log3, 10-bit, 422 color space, and whatever you're gonna be getting on something like the FX3 pretty much. It has active steady shot, which is a really big bonus for me, especially because a lot of the crop sensor lenses like this one don't have any OSS in them, and if you want to do any handheld stuff, maybe it's some vlogging, it's really important to have that stabilization on the actual sensor. So take a look at these three shots next to each other, this first one being with no steady shot, the second one being standard steady shot, and the third one with a little bit of crop is active steady shot. And you can see, especially if you put the no steady shot and the active steady shot next to each other, it's night and day. It makes it so much more stable. And for what I want this camera for, and I'm sure a lot of you guys want it for, is walking around handheld, filming yourself and getting shots like that. It makes it way, way better. It has a flip LCD screen, which, let's be fair, all cameras should be having that these days. I'm glad Sony finally figured that out. And while we're on the topic of the flip LCD, do you know that the LCD on the FX30 is actually a higher quality than on the FX3? This one is 3.66 million dots, where the FX3 is actually only 1.44 million dots. So higher resolution screen on the FX30. And that's just one of the areas that the FX30 trumps the FX3. It also has higher raw HDMI recording than the FX3, and it also gives you more lens breathing compensation options in camera and in Sony's Catalyst browse than the FX3. A big bonus is it uses the NPF-Z100 batteries from Sony, which last forever. If you guys have any experience with these, they go on for ages, and it's really convenient for someone like me because I have a whole bunch of these already from my other cameras. Now, one area the FX30 falls short from the full frame versions, that was a mouthful, is that the dual native ISO is not quite there. Not only are you going to be struggling in low light because it is a smaller sensor, but unlike the full frame versions that have that base ISO of 12,800, this does still have dual base, but the bases are 800 ISO and only a little 2,500 ISO. So anything low light is not really going to be on the same level. I mean, it's not at all going to be on the same level, but it is still nice that there's that dual base ISO. 2,500 and being super clean is still really nice, and a nice feature to have that can help you out when you're in like a sticky situation. One of the most important things I was looking for in a camera is that I can match something up with my Sony A7S3, because for me this is going to be my B camera, and I really want something that I can put side by side, maybe some behind the scenes and then some A-roll shots. And I want them to be quite seamless and like work well with each other. And if you look at these shots next to each other, they do a really good job. Like, these both look equally as clean. The colors look really nice. I don't think you would have any problem matching this with the full frame equivalent, being the FX3 or the A7S3. They go seamlessly right next to each other, and I don't think anyone would know the difference. Something cool is I can still use all my full frame lenses on this camera. They'll just be at a 1.5 times crop, so if I use something like my 24-70, I can actually get that all the way up to 105 millimeters when I'm zoomed in at 70 on this. So it's not a bad thing, and you just need to make sure that you have something that's still going to be wide enough, because like that 24 is going to be 36 millimeters maybe. And something like that would be way too close for any wide shots like this or vlogging. So if you do have a wider lens for a crop sensor camera, and then I can use all of my other lenses on this. Even something like I have a 70-200mm, which I can punch to 300mm on the crop camera. And I know on a full frame you can do like the crop in, but you're losing all that space on your sensor, and you're actually getting a lower pixel readout because you're punching in on that sensor rather than still using the whole thing. You got to remember that you're essentially getting a cinema line camera. So this thing has some really cool features as well. It has all of the mounting points all over the body that you can add on attachments or anything that you might want to. Something I really like is the tally light it has just off to the side, so even though I'm on the front I can see what I'm filming. There is a recent update for the FX30 and the FX3, which includes a whole array of things, but some of the really nice features are that you can actually get accurate shutter speeds to the shutter angle you would be using with your frame rate. So you can actually get 1/48 instead of the usual 1/50. I don't know if that's something anyone would really notice a difference, but it's nice that they are upgrading the firmware and everything on this. For some reason they didn't upgrade the firmware on the A7S3. Have you just forgotten about all of us that are on that setup? But whatever. Still a nice feature to have on the FX30. So before we get to some of the things that almost made me decide to not buy the FX30, you know what's cool is when you can find the exact track that you need for your video. Today's video is sponsored by Epidemic Sound, and they recently came out with a crazy new search engine which allows you to search for moods or themes or anything to make sure that you can find the perfect track. If you use semantic search, you can search for something like road trip, upbeat track. It's going to give you a bunch of different track recommendations for that specific scene, and you can literally just type in your scene and be super descriptive, and it's going to give you all of those tracks back, which means you don't have to sift through like all of these different categories trying to find something that might work. You can just be like, this is what I need, boom, here's a whole lot of recommendations, download them, throw them in your videos, and done, you found your track. So this is huge. One of the biggest like bottlenecks for me is finding the perfect music for my videos, and having semantic search is really, really helpful. Epidemic Sound is going to be linked in the top of my description. They were awesome enough to hook us up with a 30-day free trial, and not only that, you get the next 2 months at 50% off. So go and check it out, maybe try the semantic search. You really have nothing to lose, it's a free trial. So check it out, top of my description. Game changer, sick. You can find all the music so easily. So let's look at a couple of things that almost made me not get this camera. The first one being that the low light is gonna suck compared to the full frame versions, but it's still not gonna be bad. And if you have one of the Foster Prime lenses that Sony has recently come out with, and you still have that 2500 base ISO, I think you're gonna be fine in the majority of situations. The other area where the crop is gonna kind of suffer is with that shallow depth of field or that crazy bokeh in the background. Now, you see, not only does the crop sensor actually change your focal range, but it actually changes how you see that background. So when you're taking a lens and changing the focal range by timesing it by 1.5, you can actually do the same thing for your f-stop. So let's say this lens is a 1.8 f-stop, wide open. If you times that by 1.5, you get 2.7, which is pretty much going to be the same as a 2.8. There's like no difference really. So this 1.8 is actually a 2.8. With this lens, 1.8 is pretty fast. They also have the 16mm 1.4, and the majority of the time when I'm shooting on my full frame camera, I'm actually shooting with a f2.8 lens anyway. So this is giving me essentially the same amount of like blurry background. I know on a full frame you can shoot on like a 1.4 as well, and it's gonna be way more shallow and crazy. Here's a big one. The crop on 4K at 120 frames per second is quite a lot. And keeping in mind that you're already kind of cropped in, and then you add that crop in, it does end up zooming in quite a lot. Check out the difference between these two shots. This is how it should look, and then boom, that's the cropped version. So it is pretty significant. It's manageable. You can work with it if you know how, and especially if you have some wider lenses, it shouldn't be too much of an issue, but it is there and it's something to take note of. So let's smash out a couple others. There's no uncompressed raw photo capabilities on this. There's also no continuous drive modes for photos, but you shouldn't be buying this camera if you want to take photos on it. This is a cinema line camera. If you want to get photos, I mean, you don't even have a viewfinder on here. So I don't feel like those are like huge drawbacks, maybe a little annoying. It's not a photography camera, it's a cinema camera. The max shutter speed you can get on here is only 1/4000. If you're super bright sunlight and you don't have any ND filters, that might not be bright enough for you to still shoot in your widest aperture, but you guys shouldn't be cranking the shutter that hard anyway. You should kind of be staying to like 180-degree shutter angle. So, not really a deal breaker. Get an ND filter, you should be fine. One of the biggest things, the biggest problems with aps-c that I have over full frame is something that I can't really describe, but I think you might agree with me that there's just a certain look to full frame that's different from crop sensor cameras, and it's just this like kind of wider field of view but still with a really shallow depth of field. It's really hard to explain or put into words, or it's not even really a tangible thing, but full frame definitely has a different look. It just looks more like cinema and high end. I don't know if that's just me. Maybe you guys can agree. Let me know if you feel the same way, but I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. I hope this video was useful, and if you're thinking about getting an FX30, I hope this swayed you in either direction of deciding to or not to. I'm really happy with it so far. I've been playing around with it and it looks amazing. Other than that, remember to check out Epidemic Sound for some crazy discounts and to be able to find your music like so easy. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.